G'day, welcome back. This is the next video in my series on attacking motifs, where we're going to have a pretty detailed look at smothered mates. You know, the patterns, how often it's happened, and what sort of arrangements are typical. And we're going to have a look at a good few games. Now, I put this in attacking motifs where I did double bishop sacrifice before, and I was a bit I'm not so sure where to put this video in the playlist because it has a bit of a chess stats type flavour to it as well, where I've sort of looked at how many smother mates there are and what typically the squares they're from and what sort of supporting pieces are required and all that sort of stuff, right? So, but anyway, because there's a few games to look at, I thought attacking motifs is a good place to put it. So I'll just quickly bring up the capture screen and we'll look at the Wikipedia page first, which has a nice Wikipedia page all about smothered mates. You can see there's the typical smothered mate. King in the corner, which is obviously a very typical theme, blocked in by its own pawns, and a rook, probably a queen sack to lure the rook across there, and knight to f7 mate. And this is called Philidor's mate, and we're going to see that a few times. So that's the purest or the most well-known original form of smothered mates, but they happen all over the place. Philidor's mate, here we go, you can see it in a 2 and short. We'll look at that game as well because that's quite a famous game. So we're just sort of following in the footsteps of what other people have done. Now, it's actually attributed to Philidor, but you know, when you start looking at things, you realize that actually often things are misattributed. It was in Lucina, and then presumably it means it actually goes back to some of the Arabic manuscripts as the game. Okay, and then there's a lot of opening traps. We're going to go through a couple of the opening trap ideas. It's the Budapest Gambit, Blackburn Shilling Gambit, and the Caracan as well. So I've picked some games there because a lot of the smothered mates are actually almost exactly the same game, and they have this theme of the queen blocking the e-file with the knight delivering a smothered checkmate. And this is one sort of thing in terms of the supporting piece. The queen often is sacrificed, and secondly, it's often a supporting piece pins the bishop so that the knight can deliver checkmate. And then there are some famous games here. We're going to go through the Lasker Horowitz one. This one didn't happen in the game, so that doesn't show up. And then we've got the Cochrane Malashunda game as well. Right, and we'll see as we go along where those games come from. And then there's a couple of the, we'll look at a bit later, just a couple of Wikipedia pages on the famous openings with smothered mates in their theoretical lines. Okay. So this capture screen is kind of what we're going to go through smothered mate. We're going to go through some Greco games. Everything starts with Greco. Let's find it, and then I'm going to say, and then I'm going to go through the process of how I found these smothered mates and did a bit of analysis of them. Obviously, key features: kings in the corner, back rank, often sacrifice to enclose the king even more, and then you need often supports. The rook, bishop, and the queen, typically supporting by pinning a piece. And this is the sort of way I use Scoutfish to do one filter, Python chess to do another filter, and then we'll go over most common squares, most common supporting pieces, and then quickly opening traps, and then some extra games. So that's kind of what we're going to be going through today. So I think the first thing to do is how do we actually find these? Yeah, I guess we can run. Let's just run this for example. Right. Okay. So let that run a little bit. So it doesn't really matter which database you use. I can't remember if you used Lumbris or Caesar or Hedris for this, but it is basically you start off with a list of games. Let's say 5 million games, 9 million games, whatever the thing is, and you want to find smothered mates. Now, one way of doing it would be using Python chess, going through all those games, going to the end position, seeing if it's a checkmate, seeing if it's a knight, and seeing if there are pieces blocking the defending king in, and then there's your smothered mate. But Python chess is not, let's leave it running for a few days on a database that size, not going to cut it, right? So first of all, I do this preliminary filtering where I use Scoutfish. I've used it many times before, and basically you pass in a subfen. So let's have a look at this subfen. And in the subfens, I put kings on the back 2 ranks, and then I put some pieces around the king. I've just put 2 or 3 pieces around the king, and then I put a knight, which is checking the king. So you can see here, nothing in the first 6 rows, and then the 7th row you have a knight on b1, I believe, and then I've put a queen on c1, a queen on d1, blocking it in, and then the king is on c1. So that is checked with a couple of pieces around it. I filter for that, and then I just loop around continually. It actually does like 1,000 Scoutfish inquiries, and it saves all those games. So now we've got a set of games where the king is in check, and there are pieces around it, and that becomes a more manageable list, like 10,000 games. And then I send that into Python chess, and let's have a look at what we do in Python chess. Let me see if we can find a code. I've got too many tabs here. This one will do. So we've got the list of games. Smother created a list of games. Over and over each game. Go to the end of each game. You can see the whole thing. Go to the end of each game. Get the sand. Is it night? Delivering a mate. Okay, so that's filtered it down. And then is it a white king or a black king? And then I now go and loop around and I put pieces all around the black or white king. And if all those squares are occupied, then it's a potential, and I use these things as can't be, and then basically so you come up with a list of mates where the defending king is surrounded by its own pieces. Okay, that's good. Okay, and then the second step I then went on is finding supporting pieces. So if it's a white king, you could have a black queen or a black rook or a black bishop pinning something. So what I do is I take that piece off the board. Is it still checkmate? That means it was effective pin. And then I come up with what I do with both of these. This first loop I save in fields of the PGN, like the event where the knight mated from and where the king was. So we come up with the stats on that. And then this one I actually saved what the supporting pieces were. So you get a sense of the different types of situations which come about. Okay, so that's all good. And now we're going to sort of continue. Let me just drag that down off the screen so we can't see that anymore. And so that's sort of outlining how to find, verify the Scoutfish and both just okay. So now we're going to say, look, what are the most common squares? So let's have a look at what we came up with there. I mean, got a few things here. I mean, I think I determined both which square was mating from, and you can see F2 is very common, and that would probably be mating a white king on H8, and then F7, which would be a white knight mating a black king on H8, right? So that'll make sense. And then you got some of these other squares, which some of them are from the opening lines, like so D3 is one of these opening smother mate traps. And then you can have a look at the chart, which is the square the king was on. And you can see the most common mate is the black king on H8, followed by the white king on H1. And then the E8 and E1 seem to be the opening trap ones, most likely, or obviously that's the starting position of the king. So early on in the game, the king doesn't move, is still surrounded, gets checkmated, and then a smattering of other ones. But basically, that classic Philidor's mate with the mate on H8 seems to be the most frequent one. Okay, so let's close that down. So that's a bit of sort of the stats side of it, which I found quite interesting. I could have done a little heat map. Maybe we'll do that later, showing which squares are the most. And I say it's about 2,000, a bit over 2,000 smothered mates. Now, it's not a lot, but I think that, I mean, I've never had the joy of doing a smothered mate in any of my games, but it actually is often a tactic, particularly when you're doing a kingside attack. Smothered mate is something which both you as the attacker and the defender must bear in mind. So it's actually, its impact on games is a lot more than just the relatively few occurrences of it in real games. Okay, now the other thing I wanted to talk was the supporting pieces. We'll see a little bit more of that, but I'll just, what we can do is if I go to the game list, to give you a sense of what it looks like. You can see what I've done. This is all games, plenty of games, right? And if we go to the top, and maybe I sort it by dates, you can see the Greco games. We're going to look at these few things. And what I've done is in the event, knight at F3, knight F2, knight F2. So I've actually saved the information, king at E1, king at H1, what sort of saved the information. I could have done it better, maybe in a comment somewhere. So it's something I can go back and have a look at. And then the other one, I basically did twice, which is a bit of a waste of time. And then sort that by date again, same thing. And in this file, I've done event where I've sort of said support the queen, needed a queen pin, needed a rook pin. Pure means it's just the classic Philidor's smothered mate. Probably the queen's been sacrificed to enable it. You can see black queen, black white rook, black queen, and so on. And the interesting ones we're going to have a look at later, not yet, is sorted by that. Helps and sorted again. Rook. So here's rook and bishop. So this is where two pieces need to do the pin. And then you've got rook and bishop, right? So double pins actually happen. Obviously, the major piece pins are the either there are some on the first rank, or most typically the file that the king is on pins a pawn, for instance. So the knight can do checkmate, and then the bishop or a queen can also pin a pawn or a rook, perhaps, on the diagonal into the into the king. So that's the two types of pins which pop up, and we'll have a bit of a look at that. And then, so what I've actually come up with is we ended up with 16 games, which we're going to have a look at. And this is a mixture of some of the opening trap ones and some interesting games. Okay, so let's bring up the analysis board and start having a look at that. Oh, actually, I tell a lie. Opening ones, I didn't sort them out perfectly, but what we're going to do is we're going to search by length, and that will tell us all we need to know. Okay, so we're looking at, if we have a look, there is these ECOs. So let's have a look. We've got B18. What is to the B18 is not on the list, so let's have a look what opening this is. Okay, Caracan. Looks like a Caracan. There you go. Isn't that funny? And the pawn's pinned, and obviously all these squares are occupied. Pretty pathetic, wasn't it? Okay, let's have a look at B10. So this is another Caracan. Also 6 moves. Maybe it's the same game. Maybe same position. Slightly different. Doesn't have bishop on F5 this time. But if we have a look at the, actually didn't really start out. Started out as some sort of. This is a weird. Obviously, this was. No, a little duck back here. I wouldn't say that's theory. It's obviously just setting up the trap, which black did not realize. So these are very short games. Let's go to, let's see, 60. That is quite normal. It's like a Roy Lopez. Right, you're not going to see that very often. I mean, some of these games actually may have been preordained or predetermined. It's quite difficult to tell, actually. So we want to look for a A51 or 52. Let's just have a look. And a C50. The quickest way of doing it, let's now short by the ECO and go down to C50s. Here we are. And we'll look for short ones. Okay, so 7 games. 7 moves long. Let's have a look at this one. Let's start. Okay. Looks like white winning. Check, block, and checkmate. Once again, supporting piece, blocking the bishop. Right, and let's just pick another one of these. Let's go to there, do a 9 mover, get something a little bit different. So this is this shilling gambit, the knight to d4, sacrifices a pawn. It's this killing move here, greedy white, just to bring the bishop back. Grab the g-pawn, only way to hold the rook, cut back with check, block with bishop. Now the knight is covering the juicy square in this case. Oh, well, the knight moves away. There you go. That was quite friendly, wasn't it? So that's the sort of the Blackburn shilling version of it. We've seen the Budapest Gambit, which is a 51 and 52. These games here, and they're all short games. 9 mover. Should do this one. 7 moves. Start. So this is the Budapest Gambit. Take. Knight. Takes the pawn. Check the pawn. Bring the other knight out. Attacks the pawn. Okay, let's let the pawn go. Doesn't recapture. Sneaky. Probably not paying much attention. Oh, that's a terrible move. Checkmate. That is that. Okay, cool. So you can see how these are opening traps. If you knew the trap or you sort of your spidey sense was out, you'd never fall for these. So what we'll do now is we'll go to this support smother, and I'm going to sort by the type of support you've got. See rooks. Okay, let's have a look at these two. There's actually the other thing I'll do is go search, general, search for everything, close, and then search, filter the last move. And then now we go to this one here. Right, so on the last move. Okay, you can see that is exactly what's a rook stopping the pawn and the bishop stopping the rook. That's pretty elegant, that one. Right, so let's have a look at how that came about. Yeah, nothing too untoward. I think that knight move was the mistake that opened up the diagonal. Then you have a nice smothered mate. Okay, let's have a look at the next one with the double piece one. Okay, so you can see the classic king trapped in the corner. As I said, this is the unusual one. The rook is blocking the bishop along that, and then the bishop is stopping that rook. So that's quite neat. Right? Normally this would be a pawn, but this time you have to have it pinned. So that gives you a sense of, with these extra support ones, what's actually going on. Most of them are queen. How about queen and rook? Let's have a look at the queen and rook, see what that looks like. Okay, so the queen is acting as a bishop and the rook is blocking like that. That's good. So these, I'm just going through these because these are patterns you really have to sort of understand. So queen is acting as a rook and the bishop is acting as a bishop. Seeing all the way these patterns work out. It's the same game. So there's some duplication, unfortunately, in the databases I've been using. Okay, here's on the white side. Bishop's acting like a bishop and the rook is pinning that pawn. This one. Rook's trapping, rook's pinning the bishop and the bishop's pinning the rook. And this actually, you can see the pawns are gone. This is really strange. It's actually, the pawns have been gone for a long time. Yeah, so this little formation, it's begging for it, but obviously both dimensions have to be pinned. And then all the queen ones, and then we go to pure bishop pins, and same sort of thing, right? So that's the combos you've got. At most, it seems like 2 supporting pieces to set up the mating web. So just keep that in mind when you're finishing it off. Let's pick one of these ones. Yeah, so this is quite neat. This is actually the formation I was looking for. It's pinning the knight, which allows the other knight to do the checkmating good stuff. Okay, so that is opening traps and supporting pieces, and I hope they give you a good sense of sort of attacking pattern you have to set up to be successful or to threaten and often win material. So let's now go finally to the list of games which we were looking at, and we'll just sort that by date because we want to quickly go through the Greco ones. We will quickly go through these games. Let's have a look. These are probably not real games. The whole thing about Greco is a lot of these games were kind of made up, particularly the ones with MN. Okay, so you just have a normal Italian game. Okay, there's some annotation there. Anyway, E5, knight. Okay, black is in threatening position. Knight drops back. Yeah, white isn't. And this is a little bit different because you got the bishop supporting you in your final coup de grace there. Didn't matter if the rook take rather than knight. It's typical Greco. Smothered mate. Let's go to the end of this one and have a look at how this one came out. Once again, it's black doing it. So that's interesting, quite neat. Check, come in, check, and this is the classic double discovered check. King moves to F1, it'll be mate F2, so you get in the corner. Takes one move longer. Okay, that's neat. That's in the middle, and obviously these pieces are sort of type of piece they are. Can't attack the knight. Right, okay, so now one of the earliest sort of real examples we've got, you see this game, Lewis versus Keane from 1817. And let's just have a look at what it looks like at the end. We'll just quickly go through it. It's very entertaining looking at these things. Right, so I wanted to highlight this one because this is like the first game example we've got with the actual classic Philidor's mate. Yeah, your knight comes careening in and then can't actually take it because you get made on the back rank. So move back, and now we've got the Philidor's setup. Sacrifice the queen and checkmate. Okay, that's the first example of that. And then Morphy had a lot of these against weaker opponents. So this is one of his games. That McConnell is maybe not one of the weaker opponents, but Morphy had some NN ones and all that sort of stuff. And let's have a look at how this one came about. Okay, this is Philidor's mate. Classic setup. Coming with check. And then probably the best thing would be to take the knight. Discover check with the king, sacrifice the queen, checkmate there. Isn't that nice? Okay. This game was mentioned on the wiki page, Cochrane game. So let's have a look at how Cochrane did it at the end. This has got a slightly different pawn structure, but the bishop there is not helping at all. So therefore, coming with the classic kind of Philidor mate, which is good. So these games, you can obviously go through. These games are very entertaining, and you can see the list of them there if you want to sort of search them in your favorite database. Okay, we have a Capablanca one. That's quite good. Madison. This is Philidor's mate. So you can see Philidor's mate actually occurs quite a bit. And going back to those statistics, that square and that square tend to be the most commonly used ones. And then now we're going on to some of the rarer squares. Yeah, so look at the mate here. Wow, look at that. So check mate on F1 with the knight on D2. That's quite unusual. Oh, Lasker Horowitz. So that was one of the ones also mentioned on the Wikipedia page. This looks very similar to those opening trap ones where you just get blocked in the middle of the board. So that's not good. Got one from Michael Towle to have a quick look at. Oh, this is a 10 move game. So this is almost like an opening trap one. Comes careering in, takes, check. I mean, probably that move would be better, I'm guessing. But anyway, knight in the way, smother mate. And this is the famous one, also on the Wikipedia page. Let's have a look how this happened. This is Timon beating short. Right, so it looks like white is very happy here because he's got this pawn on the 7th rank, which is obviously not helping the black position. That's in check. And classic Philidor's. And there was another one here between top players. This is Grishchuk versus Ponomarev, E2000. Okay, so this setup's a little bit different the way the queen charges in. That's threatening the checkmate pattern. Took that bishop. A checkmate there, that's quite neat. I think there's a knight at b6 checkmate, which is also quite unusual. So the king's on c1, having castled, and the queen is doing the pawn. And it's also a family fork type thing, so that's it's quite neat. So go back, pawn advances, and the knight moves to the wrong square. I think is probably the way of thinking about it. Look at this one on twice. Knight at e3. Is that an unusual mating position? Yeah, knight at e3. Mating the king on f1. That looks quite funny. And it's because this is a knight. Cannot cover. And these bishops are stacked up there. I think we might just look at this last one. Looks like these are both strong players. See what happens. Oh, hey, I like this one. It's h3 mate. Also another unusual mating position. Queen's in the pawn. And that's it. So at this stage, well, white's already lost, but you know, obviously there's so much threats going on here, but he moved to bishop and just allowed the mate. Okay, cool. Right. Okay. So, have you found that enjoyable? I just did this video because I just did the one on knight under promote, and the knights are very tricky and quite funny, and this was just good to have a look at, you know, some of the occurrences and stats behind and the patterns that you see with smothered mates. So I hope you enjoyed that, and thank you very much for watching.